Let us begin, if we can, Balaji, with the current state of the crypto market. I know a lot of people would love to hear your thoughts on what you're observing. And just to date this, we are recording July 2022, and then perhaps hearing your thoughts on the India sphere. But let's begin with those two prompts.
Sure. So I'm not a trader, I'm much more of a long-term investor / angel / VC. There's actually there's a fun tweet today by a guy, Travis_Kling. I've been doing this for 46 straight months. I've never seen one like this before. And he's just basically got a list of all the carnage in the markets. And the thing is, that carnage is in the crypto markets, but it's also in the non-crypto markets. And it's a little more pronounced in crypto, but it is definitely like a systemic type of thing. And the way I kind of think about it is there's very few spaces that I get into where I don't have an all-weather thesis that works independent of the price. And so I was in genomics way before people were talking about genomics. I was doing machine learning way before people were talking about machine learning. It's kind of weird to see people talking about stuff that you're doing 10 or 15 or whatever years ago. Not to say in a thump chest way, but just that you want to try to identify these things that have value independent of that. And the fundamental value of cryptocurrency is, can you have a system where the root permissions are independent of the US and Chinese establishments? That is the fundamental question, is one of digital freedom. Because, and I can kind of tease that out and so on and so forth, but it's fundamentally, do you actually have property rights on the internet, digital property rights? Or can somebody with a police badge from the US or Chinese establishment, depending on what side of the world you're on, get into all of your stuff, surveil all of your stuff, take all of your stuff, freeze and seize all of your stuff, and so on and so forth, right? So that fundamental question of whether digital property rights should exist and whether they will be valuable in the medium to long term is what gives me confidence in the space, not the specific price. So I can talk more, but that's, price is down, price is up. I would only invest in those kinds of things that I believe further that aspect of freedom and control.
Question for you. In our first episode, I think at some point you mentioned, for someone who is not going to make a full-time study of things, splitting their allocation to crypto. And this is not investment advice. This is two people talking for informational purposes only, but splitting 50-50 Bitcoin ETH. Does that still hold, or would you, based on what you've seen since and what you are seeing now, maybe any developing theses, change that?
No, I'd say stick with that. I mean, again, not investment advice and so on, but basically those ecosystems are just still absolutely massive. If you look at, as I said, I think I said something like, buy it and then hold it for 10 years. And let's see where we are in 10 years. The fundamentals in terms of not just number of users, but conversation. I mean, if Twitter was open source, or rather more specifically, if it was open state, that is to say, not just the source code was available, but the backend was available, the database was available. Okay, not just through an API, but that you could just hit a key and see every tweet if you wanted to, every public tweet at least. If it was open state and you could plot the number and the depth of interactions on Bitcoin and Ethereum and all of their offshoots, not just those keywords, but the thousands of keywords and memes and communities and so on that have been built on these are like countries that have built out. And, those are things that just have mass to them. And you can mark them to market. They've got downs and they've got ups, but they are absolutely massive things with tens of millions of dedicated people around the world. And they've come out of nowhere. So I don't believe that they're going to go away. But again, not financial advice. This is just my personal belief. You can get much more sophisticated than that. But the absolute worst thing to do, by the way, and this is maybe obvious, but I'll just say this, is the worst thing to do is buy an asset when it's in the news and sell it when it's in the news. And what you instead want to kind of do is it's inevitable that something will pique your attention. Okay. And then what you do is you set a calendar reminder, let's say 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, so that you are almost like retargeting yourself. And then you go and you actually do research on it outside of the scrum, right? Outside of people yelling about it, you intentionally do it async to the market sentiment. There's a famous cartoon. It's a guy, he's like, this looks like it could be a good buy. And someone overhears, they're like, buy. And then the guy's like, this stock could really excel. And someone overhears, sell, like this, right? And it's this hilarious sort of loop, which you don't want to be the current thing. You don't want to be the person who is buying high, selling low. And I think the only way to not do that is set calendar reminders, assess your portfolio, like whether it's a quarterly basis or something like that, and try to make async decisions. Like you almost never want to sell on bad news, buy on good news. That's my macro outside of any given, specific thing.
Yeah, let me add one thing to that, which is humans in general, and I succumb to this sometimes too, overestimate their predictive abilities. So what is very helpful is set a time. It could be once a year, Jan 1, Jan 5, doesn't really matter, where you sit down and you identify, say, I'm just picking a time frame, 6 months from now, and you grab a bunch of potential asset classes or stocks or indices. So maybe it's Bitcoin, a barrel of oil, S&P 500, and make your predictions. And then set a reminder to look at them 3 months or 6 months later when you may, as you are influenced subconsciously by chatter on Twitter, trends in the news, and so on, to think that you know where things are going. Let's see how successful you were over the preceding 6 months. So that's also a good way to check your cognitive biases.